Okay, the meeting's been called to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, see a symbol of privilege among the United Cultures.
Consideration of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the special meeting agenda.
Second. Motion is second. All in favor? Aye. Agenda approved. First item A, information regarding the Gila National Forest. Beth Eiley is here from the U.S. Forest Service. And
do I come right here?
yes, please. I think you have a button to push there, and it should turn red. Oh, maybe it's on.
Hello?
Sounds like it's on, yeah.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Is your button red?
I am not sure. Oh, there you go.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there we go.
Good morning. Thanks for giving us special dispensation to take advantage of your special meeting we got the tip from Misha last week, and he said, maybe we want to get your project in front of the commission, so thanks for that, and for Bernadette helping us get it on the schedule and get our information materials. I understand I only have a couple minutes here, so I was basically going to present the project and then let you know when our public involvement activities and schedule is. My name is Beth Eiley. I am detailed in behind the former District Ranger Diane Talafaro, who took a job in New Hampshire. So I'm on a temporary assignment, and this project squarely happens on my watch. So I'm here to present to you. Our project's called the Burro Mountains and Bear Creek Roads projects, and they're on the Silver City Ranger District. So I'm the Silver City District Ranger detailed. The first project is in the Big Burro Mountains. We are proposing to decommission or take out of service a portion of the roads that were closed in the travel plan for a variety of reasons. We have a need to restore productivity to those lands. We have a need to help ensure compliance with the travel plan. We're trying to get vegetation back on those routes. So as part of this process, we've created these large format maps, and next Tuesday we're having a public meeting to lay those maps out, bring them to the public at the Tyrone Homeowners Association Hall, and go through the proposed routes to make sure that none of them are impacting somebody who has a permit need or a resource need on those routes that we didn't anticipate. We tried to get ahead of that. So decommissioning is part of what it is we do. It's to help get land back to productivity. The second part is, while we were taking folks' attention on a landscape-wide scale, we had also received, in the boroughs, we'd also received some comments from public folks about our transportation decision and the service that the ATV trails were not providing as a recreation opportunity in the boroughs. So as part of looking at those maps, we're also asking folks to engage with us in conversation about the utility of those routes. Could some of them serve motorized use otherwise? And so that component of it is to get feedback. We have not actually mapped out the total path forward on this. This would be like cracking open a little component of the travel plan decision. We're not sure what that's going to look like, and we are trying to be cognizant of workload and complexity of workload. So we're having that conversation that has come up because of public comments on that piece of that travel plan. Certainly there are other comments on the travel plan and how we've implemented it, but we're looking at this piece of it. The third component we have is in the Bear Creek area. We recently acquired a piece of property that is part of the overall transportation system in that area, and we were not able to really look at the transportation system in there comprehensively when we were doing travel planning. So now that we actually have that property, we also want to engage with the public in Bear Creek on what their interests are on that transportation system and what our options could be. Same thing, depending on what we hear, we can take the next step and have a proposal to move forward. But we're basically receptive to the feedback we get from the public on that one as well. So our hard decision we're trying to make is the decommissioning one. The other two are more flexible. It starts with the conversations we hear from the public over the maps. So that's our project scope, those three. Our public comment period goes to about the middle of August. Community meeting next Tuesday at the Tyrone Homeowners Association Hall from 5:30 to 7:30. And that's like a kick dirt over maps session. And then on Wednesday and Thursday after that meeting, we're taking comments from the public who can't make that meeting, come in and talk to the team members, talk to me, and we'll go through that project. So, any questions for us this morning? My companion here, if you get too deep in the weeds, is Tony Ibarra. He's a wildlife biologist on the district, been here a long time, so if it blows me over, I will refer to Tony.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
First, thank you for coming. We appreciate you. But I wanted to know, how many miles are we discussing here on closed road proposed for decommission?
That's a good question. We have a total of a little over 100 miles of closed roads in the boroughs. The proposal that we have, or the map that we show the routes that we think are no longer needed and can be decommissioned, has approximately 60, although our GIS guy is, he'll get to 3 significant figures on that, but approximately 60. So about 60%. Based on the feedback, we'll find out, what in the end will be a specific proposal that we're going to scope. So, will it be less? Perhaps. Will it be more? I doubt it.
So we're talking 60 miles total.
60 miles plus or minus, yeah. I'll keep that as an approximate because we don't have those GIS numbers. It's a GIS exercise.
And why were these skipped during the past process? We went through a 5-year process. Why weren't they decommissioned then if they were felt worthy of decommission?
So the transportation decision that was made was administrative. It said, here is the designation of the transportation system, but the ground disturbing decision and effects that would go with decommissioning were not evaluated in that travel plan. I can't tell you all the reasons why, except that it would have created more complexity to that analysis, which was already appeared to be complicated enough when you think of forest-wide travel planning. So,
well, and I mean, it does make me start thinking, because we went through a real rigorous process whenever you decided which roads you were going to close to begin with, and there was a lot of people that came out, especially from the boroughs, to discuss not closing a lot of those roads.
Right.
So are these the ones you're picking up after? I mean,
no,
if they were
these
going to affect you before
yeah.
in that big process, why are they affecting you now?
These roads were closed with that transportation decision, but the next step was, of the ones that are not needed, which ones can we do the stabilization work so that they're not an erosive state on the landscape, so that they are getting vegetated again, so that they don't look like a road anymore. And we're trying to make sure that we get it right. There's a fair amount of livestock infrastructure out there, to make sure that we didn't inadvertently close something that the power line folks use for maintenance. So there will be closed roads that will have permitted use on them for administrative activities, but they're not available for general public recreation use because they've been closed. So
what's the difference? I mean, so you're telling me that they were closed already?
They were closed in the transportation decision. Some of them, actually, I understood were closed before that, and that's getting back into a little bit farther back that probably I'm well versed enough to explain.
So what's the difference between decommissioned and closed?
Closed is the administrative status, meaning it's closed to motorized use or it's open to motorized use. And that was the primary decision in the travel plan, is what designated transportation was allowed on a route. This is for example, this is a single track, non-motorized trail. This is a single track motorized trail. Or this is an ATV trail. Or this is closed to motorized activity. And of that subset, there's 100-something miles of those routes out there in the boroughs. A portion are being proposed to be decommissioned, the stabilization efforts, the revegetation.
And I think what causes a lot of heartburn is if you're permitting it to someone because they need to be out there for some odd reason, whether it be ranching or out there fixing a telephone line, then what's the difference between my tires going on that road and theirs? I mean, I think that's what's creating a lot of heartburn for our residents. If they're closed, then they should be closed, period. Because that's what you all are recommended, then that's what should happen. Not give anybody that can actually qualify for a permit to be on those roads. That's what's creating a lot of heartburn with our residents, and I stand with them. I think it's ridiculous.
I appreciate that. I think that is it a tweener, if you want to say that, as far as the road goes? Yes. Does it help meet other resource concerns if the travel on a route is, maybe very infrequent or periodic? Some of them, it may be once a year when the permittee is standing up their water development, which is better. So I am assuming that in the effects analyses that was done in the travel plan, they weighed the infrequent use on a route even that's closed, even though there's infrequent uses, it has a more positive effect for those other resources than if it was open to the public. I think you're bringing out something that is it's an intrinsic complexity to the travel planning process and the decisions, because we would like to have our management be more black and white than that, but the permit system is alive and well. We have routes that go to people's private property that it's not an opportunity for the public, so we close it, reduces maintenance, reduces issues, that kind of thing. Otherwise, if the public right at somebody's back door, then there's issues. I guess I can take that back and we could visit about it. I don't see us revisiting that component of the travel plan unless we hear a hue and cry from the public, and that's not, I didn't get that assignment particularly, so I'm working on this one. So anyway, but I can bring that back.
And I think it's something that probably does need to be talked about, but the way I kind of feel is that if you're going to authorize someone through some kind of permitting process to utilize these roads, then you're discriminating against the common user, because they should be able to use that road too, if it exists, even if it's a permitted road. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm fighting for the majority of the people here, and I think they feel the same way.
Appreciate your comments on that. Take back, like I said, I got to look at bring it back to the forest level. You're making a kind of a broader scope comment than what I have in front of me today. So
I appreciate that.
I will do it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you for being here and bringing this information to us. We're looking about, you're talking about 100 miles of roads that were closed during the travel management plan. So I wasn't in office when this was done, so I just want to clarify that I understand what we're talking about. So we have about 100 miles of roads that were closed during the travel management plan, and you are now wanting to do public input on decommissioning about 60% of those roads so that they can't be used at all, and that you can do this mitigation work that you're talking about. So of the remaining 40%, do you have an idea of about what percentage of that 40% is permitted roadway?
So here is my understanding. There's livestock grazing all through the boroughs. A lot of those roads are like go in to an improvement facility, a water development, something like that, and then come back out. And so those activities are authorized in their annual plans for their livestock grazing, so that probably covers a bunch of those roads. And then there is the need to maintain some, my understanding, power line infrastructure. So specific access to specific improvements on power lines. So what I can do, if that is helpful for, especially as our public meeting goes forward, is to get the statistics on, of the roads we're not proposing to decommission, what specifically are the uses on them that we're keeping them on the landscape for. Would that be fair?
Very helpful.
Okay.
And so what I think I hear you saying is that if someone is applying for a permit to use one of these closed roads, then they have to say in that permitting process how many times a year they're going to use it?
In the case of livestock-related access, it's pretty well known to us, and their instructions say you have to stand up your improvements at the beginning of each grazing season. So it happens at a certain time of the year. And then if there's breakdowns or something like that, those tend to be more infrequent. For something like fence maintenance, that would be like if the water infrastructure has a mechanical problem and has to get repaired. So for something like fence maintenance, that also can have kind of a beginning of the grazing season, stand up the improvements, make sure they're ready to go. But that work practically happens at a variety of times of the year, so we try and spell that out as well. The other permits, I really don't know enough about what other activities and at the timelines that they would happen, so I'd have to get that for you. And we can put that together for our public meeting.
I think that would be really great. That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have many of Commissioner Edwards' questions, but one additional, and I might be misreading the map, but it looks like there's at least one stretch of county road that's being proposed for decommissioning.
I sure hope not.
Right? That would be kind of weird.
That would be so bad.
So, do you have the same map that I'm looking at?
Yeah, this 11 by 17, does it?
Yeah, so there are 3 places where Highway 90 is marked as Highway 90. You see those 3?
Yeah.
In the middle one of those 3, there's a county road that takes off to the northwest, just south of that middle Highway 90 marker.
Right.
And sure looks like maybe those X's apply to very small stub roads going off to the side, and I just can't see those. But it looks like the county road itself has got X's on it.
Yep, it does. Let me make sure our GIS guy catches that, because so on our main map, those looked a little more purple, and then the print of this one, they look kind of reddish.
I see.
So, yep, no, we'll check on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Yep.
Any further questions then?
That's correct.
What road is that?
Gold Gulch.
Gold Road.
It's the word gold from
Yes.
Gold Gulch.
Right by the word gold.
Yeah.
Well, if we did that, we definitely don't mean that.
Okay, no.
We've been on that road. Like the road. Anyway, anything else?
Sorry.
Conversation on Bear Creek?
Can you,
The conversation we're gonna have on Bear Creek?
I guess if, you want me to get in a little more detail? Would that be helpful?
I got some questions, because
Okay.
the letter we got, it says it was just recently acquired, and that was what, about 9 months ago, a year ago, something like that?
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, I've been here all the time.
That is fun stuff.
So, on the map, it already shows that, that road is only open to administrative use or written authorization or closed. Is that true?
Okay, so here is the deal with Bear Creek. So when we made the travel plan decision, so if you see the piece has labeled 506 right in the middle and it's red, the travel plan decision was to close that segment to motorized use. And
How was it included in the travel plan when you didn't even own it at the time?
well, okay, so let me back up. So the piece that is dashed black and white to the east of it,
Correct.
that is the piece of road that was in private land that we acquired.
Okay.
So because we did not own that and could not introduce public use, the piece to the west that is red, the travel plan decision was to keep that closed because we can't get people down there. The route from the west is a little bit rougher route, and the travel plan decision was to have that access be by permit only on the western side of that 506 route. So when we acquired the piece that's now where Ben Lilly Pond is, the question became, what is the status of that transportation route since we've just acquired the property? And because we have not specifically designated the transportation system any more than any other management activity since we just acquired it, right now it would be only open to an authorized use. So that was the thing that precipitated this conversation and to give feedback on what are our options now in Bear Creek, now that we have public land from the east end, east of Ben Lilly Pond, all the way to the west end. And so that, we realized this could be kind of a snaggly kind of a conversation, but, it's ripe for being discussed and ultimately a decision made by the forest supervisor. So anyway, that's piece, that black and white highlight piece is the piece that was private.
Okay. I guess my misconception was I assumed that the outline of it was the piece that we were talking about. I knew it wasn't exactly square like that.
You're kind of right, and historically, it was private land all the way through, and so it took acquisition in chunks to get all of that. Yeah.
That's why I was wondering how some of it already had been administratively closed or administratively made motorized trail
Right.
when it couldn't be in the, so I understand that probably wasn't all during that plan.
Right, no, and we understand there's de facto use happening because we have not asserted management controls in there and that kind of thing, so, anyway.
So, Mr. Chair, are you finished?
Yes.
So then the conversation essentially would be, so the road, 506, from one end of this rectangle to the other, some parts of it are administrative use only and some parts are closed. And so the conversation would be, should we close the whole thing? Should we re-look at the closure for potential opening the whole thing to motorized use? Or should it all be administrative? That would be the three choices, I assume?
Yeah, or leave it as is, which is messy. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think that's what the feedback we're looking for from people. How do you use this area? What would you desire to see? What are the values that you see in there? And get it out on the table.
Okay.
Yeah. I am not projecting what the eventual outcome of that conversation is. My job was to get the conversations facilitated, so that's what. And it started today. Okay.
And so it started today, and you're looking to close public comment somewhere around the middle of August? Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, approximately middle of August. Here's the thing, for something like this, where it's an ongoing conversation, and it was lumped in with this boroughs decommissioning, which has a NEPA documentation need. So if the conversations get more involved and we have to, provide a few more options for people or extend the amount of time, we might just have to do that.
So I think that might be prudent on the Bear Creek piece, because it's clearly a long way from Tyrone. And I suspect that there's going to be a tremendous amount of interest in that conversation, and that it might, if our job is to get as much public input into this process as possible, it might be appropriate to have a meeting in Silver City and a meeting in PA.
Okay.
At the minimum.
Okay. What I can tell you is we've tried to tease out those organizations and landowners that are in there to make sure they are getting this, so that they're also getting specifically targeted for information as well as, we haven't had anything in the paper yet, but we didn't want to do it till after this, so.
I suspect that there will be a lot of public interest in this piece.
It seems to be a popular place. Yeah.
So I don't guess, Mr. Chairman, I don't guess I expect you to respond to this, but every time we talk about roads and we talk about closures, it always just confounds me that I guess the Department of Agriculture must be the only department I know of that gets to blatantly discriminate against handicapped people. Closing roads blatantly discriminates against handicapped people, so they can't see the same things that all of us get to see. So I don't expect a response, because that's probably way higher level than all of us. But I have relatives that have lost their ability to do this in protecting our right to say what we want to say, and they no longer get to use so much of the forest because of road closures.
Appreciate that.
Anything further from Ms. Simon? Thanks for coming today and listening to our comments, and thanks for informing us about the meeting on Tuesday.
All right, appreciate that, and thank you again for letting us come in on your special meeting. You want me to push the red button?
No, you just leave it on, I think. Thank you.
Okay.
So the next item on the agenda is something that I put on because of back and forth information I'm getting from, I'll go ahead and say what it is so everybody will be clear. Discussion and possible action on essential air service or passenger air service to and from Silver City, Grant County Airport. So I've been getting some questions and making response to the U.S. Department of Transportation. And it's my understanding that they're going to be, while they've made this decision in other areas, they still haven't made the decision, at our airport. They're going to be, according to information I had from Kevin Schlemmer, if you're familiar with that name, they're going to be meeting with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Department of Transportation. And I just wanted to, when I put this on the agenda, I wasn't sure that the other commissioners had been able to see the communication from Boutique Air, specifically the CEO, which is about a 9-page communication to DOT. And so hopefully, if you haven't been able to see this, here's a copy of it. And it was, I just wanted the commission to have a chance to respond to some of the information he's putting out. I believe he's putting out some information that's not correct. Whether that's his misunderstanding or he's intentionally doing that is not for me to decide. I went ahead and responded this morning further to some, and there's been some back and forth between USDOT and me, and I wanted to offer that opportunity to the other commissioners and just point that out if they weren't aware of it. And also, I guess it crossed my mind that at the one meeting where Boutique presented, the CEO did present there, and he made that kind of fuzzy to DOT whether there was ever a meeting where he could present, in my mind. And actually, in his communication to Boutique customers, it was leading them to believe that he was never had an opportunity to present. I was at that meeting, and some of the county staff were at the meeting. I don't know if it'd be if they would be interested in responding to some of this too, because since some of the commissioners weren't, I just thought that I would open that up for discussion, and then we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, I personally would like to see our county manager's office put out a letter or response to the letter that the CEO has written in behalf of all of us, and giving just the procedures and the chances that they got to come out and speak to us. And that way it kind of answers the Department of Transportation's questions on what were the procedures and exactly what happened that led to us choosing the other firm.
I thought that might be an idea. So thank you for that. There's several questions in here, and I should have been probably more prepared. But one of the things that the CEO brought up is that there was never a discussion about changing the schedule, and that's not true, because that, in my memory, that discussion took place at the meeting where he was presenting. And my memory, which may be different from those other attending, was that he said something along the lines of, "You don't know what you're asking. We have, it would be difficult." And he didn't seem willing to do that, and now he's presenting a different picture. And that's just one example of what I think needs to be.
If he would have given us the effort that he's using out there to try and combat against us, maybe things would have been differently. And maybe he had to consider using that kind of effort in the future to come over here and speak to us, versus having 50 late flights in the past year and all the other things, that have come and led to this decision.
Well, I think it's also unfair that he has a list of his customers and seems to be selectively sending this information to certain customers and not to other ones. I don't know if he's, I don't know how they're determining which customers they send it to, but we don't have that list, so we can't communicate to those customers except in response when they communicate to us. And I will say that I've responded to at least 30, and overwhelmingly of those 30 plus I've responded to. Once they find out there's two sides of the story, they become either indifferent or actually accepting of the Commission's decision to go with Advanced Air.
Mr. Chair, I've had a similar experience with all the ones I've been able to respond to, which is easily over 30.
Okay.
But I also make a point of acknowledging that I think we did have some failings on our part, and I think it's appropriate for us to do that. I was the only commissioner able to attend the the Advanced Air presentation, and you were the only one able to attend the Boutique Air presentation.
Well, I think as a correction, I think Advanced Air actually had several. I was at one of their.
I only knew about one. That was the one I went to.
I think I was at one where I think Randy was there, and maybe Misha.
I was going to represent Martinez.
Misha and Priscilla were at the one I was at. Okay.
I think what they did is have multiple ones so that they could accommodate all our schedules.
And so what I look forward to in this letter, which I think is a great idea, I would actually like to learn more about the process beforehand, and now the question I would have would be, why did Advanced Air have several, which I didn't even know about, and Boutique had one? Second question, it baffles me, I have to say, that a proposer would expect an invitation to present, and yet that's what Mr. Simpson expected, apparently. He claims that in every other EAS airport that he proposes at, he receives such an invitation. So I would like to know, as part of this letter, what communications he did receive, and how he may have known or not known that, in fact, we were having an open public meeting that obviously anybody could come to, including him, because I don't know those details.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Brown, Commissioners, Priscilla Lucero is actually the one who set up the meetings with Advanced Air and Boutique. She did it in the original process when Boutique was chosen, and so she has been the point of contact for this community with DOT. So she's the one that set those meetings up. I had every intention of calling her today to find out exactly what her process was. What we did is we published notice of possible quorum that you guys would be attending the different sessions. And Mr. Simpson was invited to the community because Priscilla set up a meeting for him the afternoon of May 31st in which he was in attendance. Unfortunately, not everyone could be there. I do know Representative Martinez was in that meeting. There was representation from Freeport. There was representation from the public. There was county staff. Commissioner Billings was there. Chamber staff was there. I don't remember who else.
There were some citizens there who had seen it advertised.
So he was afforded the same invitation as Advanced, and the same invitation he was originally when he made his presentation when he obtained the ESA contract. But I will get the details from Priscilla exactly and make sure that I outline that in the letter that you discussed.
Well, that would be great. And the additional issue that I'm bringing up is to appear at this commission, not at a public meeting, because in that case, he or any other proposer is guaranteed that we will hear them, right? When Ms. Lucero, she's doing a great job, but when she sets a date, we can't all make it. I could not make that date. If the date is set for a commission hearing, then we're all going to hear what they have to say. In the future, it strikes me that might be a good process.
Duly noted, no, they were not invited to attend a commission meeting. Advanced Air made the effort to follow our agenda and was here any time it was discussed, but he chose not to.
And that's the point I've made over and over. Everybody knows we're having a meeting, why do we need an invitation? But there's also no harm in an excess of invitation. So in the future, that'd be good.
Okay.
And just for clarification, the representative from Advanced Air called me prior to our commission meeting and asked me about was his attendance necessary at that meeting, and I said no. And he said, well, can I go? And I said, oh yeah, of course you can go, it's a public meeting. And he said, well, I have an opportunity to speak, and I said, I don't think so. And I don't think it's necessary that you go. I reiterated that, and he showed up anyhow. I had no contact with Boutique because they weren't following the meeting schedule. But I want to make it clear, I did not call Advanced Air's representative. He contacted me, and I didn't encourage him to attend or discourage him particularly. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I appreciate Commissioner Brown's comments about a plethora of invitations might not be a bad idea. But I also think that this is a competitive process for services, and I think it's up to the proposers to do their due diligence and contact the manager's office or do whatever it takes to make sure that their business proposal is in front of us. So I think the idea that anyone had to have an invitation, and the key word there is had to have an invitation, is very misleading, and it's misleading to the public.
Thanks. Further comment? So the manager's office can go ahead and write a letter in response. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, when do we expect a final decision from the DOT?
Well, that's what's cloudy. I've asked Mr. Schlemmer when that's coming, and he didn't respond to that particular email, so I've asked him again to respond. He responded to some more I sent him this morning. So hopefully he'll respond to that soon. I'm thinking that from prior communications with him, it should be like any day. In fact, I think their original intent was to have decided before now, except that they got so much information from the community. And I'd also like to say one more thing. There were some county staff members at some of those meetings. They may have some valuable input for you if you want to consider that. Okay. Anything further on that item? Okay. Resolutions. Item C. Approve or disapprove resolution R1818 authorizing question to be presented to the qualified electors of Grant County, New Mexico on the ballot for the 2018 regular general election concerning the proposed issuance of general obligation bonds and otherwise relating thereto.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, what you have in your packet was three different drafts of the resolutions based on your conversation at the previous meeting. The original resolution that is my recommendation. The $4 million for roads, $2 million for county facilities. Louise has drafted two others. One that consists of 3 questions, adding an additional $2 million for the hospital. Another version that changes it to $4 million for roads, $4 million for buildings, which the language in the statute allows you to hospitals is included in that language. So there are 3 different versions of resolutions that you should have had the opportunity to review. And so Lorraine is here to go over the different financing structures based on that conversation. So I'll turn the floor over to her unless you have any questions prior to that.
Oh, go ahead.
So, I'm not exactly sure how this works technically, but I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution, the original one from the July 19th, 2018 meeting. And I'm assuming that if I do that, and then it's seconded, and we can have discussion, and Relaya can talk during that discussion, but it seems obvious to me that the hospital's not interested in being part of this, and so I'm not sure that there's any point in spending the time talking about the other 2 resolutions. And so I'm just thinking about that from a technical point, that if I make that motion, then we could have the discussion after it's seconded. Is that correct?
I'll second that motion.
So we're in discussion. During our discussion, we're inviting other input apparently.
Right.
And that's just not normally how we do it, right? Normally we have presentations.
I know, but I don't see any point in having the presentation on the other 2 if the hospital's not interested in just
And that, number 2, the second of the 3, which is the first of the 2 additional, does not require the hospital to be involved at all. That's the one that, at the moment, I think. So,
I think during the discussion, then we could ask questions about that for sure.
it's fine. It works for me either way. I'm just not sure why we're doing it differently this time, but that's fine.
I
I
think
can withdraw the motion if you would prefer.
I really think that the reason they put out there that they weren't wanting the monies is because they really wanted to prove themselves. It's not that they didn't need the money, and I think we need to do the best thing that we can to try and prepare them and put them in a better place in the future. Because if they can use $2 million to fix their HVAC units and their roof, then that puts them in a way bigger and better place for the future. And I think we still should consider. I think it was a pride thing at the beginning when they said they didn't really need the money, but maybe I'm headed in the right direction if there's more discussion.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, may I respond to that? One thing that I would bring to your attention, the language in the statute is very clear that it has to be for a capital improvement. It cannot be a repair. And when you start looking at roofs, it has to be a complete re-roof process. They cannot do a part of it. They cannot do any kind of maintenance, like come in and put a coating on it. It's very clear that it is a remodeling project and it has to be a complete re-roof project. They cannot simply go in and repair their HVAC system. It would have to be a complete remodel. The language in the statute is pretty clear.
So like a replace of a building, so they have to knock it down and...
Well, not the entire building, but it would have to be a new roof, or it would have to be a complete replacement of the HVAC system. And I can tell you by the quotes we received on the roofs for our building, $2 million is not going to go far towards their roofing project, nor the intense HVAC system that they have.
And that's
so
my
I would
point
just
exactly.
caution you that I did have that although, yes, we want to be able to help them, if they're not prepared to spend the money in the time frame that they have to spend the money, is it for... I mean, what's the point of putting it out there if they are not prepared to spend the money? And when I spoke with Kathy this morning, she reiterated what was expressed in the article that Ben Fisher published, that they have some other things they need to do first in order to be prepared for that kind of money, and they may need more than that than what we can do at this point. So I just wanted to make it very clear, it cannot be for any type of maintenance, and when you get into roofs, it has to be a complete remodel, not fix part of it. That's not allowed by statute under the bonding capacity.
Okay.
So, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, and we can make it again after the presentation. I think we'll find some things out that might be helpful.
Okay, very good, thanks. We're ready, please.
Okay, so from the discussion that I'm hearing, a lot of my presentation might very well not be valid. So I'll just kind of take some direction from you. Basically, what I was going to go over based on the direction I received from the last meeting was that this board was contemplating increasing the amount on the resolution from $6 million to potentially $8 or $9 or $10 or whatever the current mill levy would allow. And so I've prepared some schedules based on those amounts for increase. If that's not relevant to the discussion, we can skip it and move forward.
It's relevant to me.
Okay, then in that case, I'll just pass around some pamphlets just so that you can follow along, and it's going to be the same as what's on the screen here.
And while we're getting these passed out, we were also going to get some more information on ICIP this meeting. Am I correct on the list and amounts, priorities? We talked about that at the last regular meeting.
That was a misunderstanding on my part. I thought we were going to discuss that at the August meeting. Misha probably could reiterate that on the top of his head for the most part, but maybe not exact figures.
If Mr. Lara should be willing to do that, not right now, take your time, let her go through the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, well, while that's being passed out, I'll just quickly go over the first part of this presentation you've already seen, so I won't spend time on it. The first page is that financing plan overview, which just shows you the county's current bonding capacity, just a reminder of what was discussed at previous meetings. And note that these numbers take into account the proposed issuance of $6 million worth of general obligation bonds, two sequential $3 million issues, one occurring in 2019 and another in 2020, and this is just an overview of the bonding capacity. So the next few schedules we've already gone over that show the county's assessed valuation and tax levy and outstanding general obligation debt and historical annual debt service. So we'll just skip over that for now, and we'll go to page 8 in your packet. So let me preface this by saying, I was asked to do some work on this to determine exactly how much the current mill levy would allow the county to bond for without an increase in property taxes. And the answer to that is you could go up to a maximum of about $12 million. That couldn't be issued in one single issue. You would have to split it up into two $6 million issues because you would need to spread it over that additional year. This would also require you to go out a full 20 years. And after subsequent discussion with Ms. Webb, we've opted not to present the $12 million scenario. Instead, we've opted to present the more conservative $8 and $10 million scenarios. So the first section you'll see is for a $10 million authorization and the various options for issuance under that $10 million authorization. So contemplating a $5 million issue in 2019 and another $5 million issue in 2020, if you went out to a 20-year term, you can see that the average annual debt service would be somewhere in the realm of $367 for that first issue to $405 on that second issue. And you can see by the graph it still leaves you with some capacity open so that you're not maxing out the capacity on that mill levy. If the need should arise for additional funds, say for the hospital, for the Gila Regional Medical Center or other county needs, you could layer on additional debt. However, you could take that down to a 15-year term. That would be the minimum time frame that this could be paid off if you went for $10 million. And you can see that that really maxes out the current mill levy, and any additional debt raise or authorization that the county would request from voters would increase the taxes by some incremental amount. So the next two slides, numbers 10 and 11, are just the debt service detail on those two scenarios. And then the next two slides show you what that issue would look like in a single $10 million issue over 20 years and a single $10 million issue over 16 years. You couldn't do it in 15. So this was just to kind of address some of the questions that came up about how long the county would have to carry that debt if you guys opted to raise the issue to $10 million. And so as you can see, you could pay that off in as little as 15 or 16 years, depending on the issuance timing that was opted for. The next set of scenarios is for $8 million, and this starts on slide 15. And so you can see if contemplating two sequential $4 million issues, this could be paid off in 20 years, and would leave open some capacity to layer on additional debt. You wouldn't max out that current mill levy. Or you could pay it off in 13 years, which would take you almost to the maximum of what the mill levy yields, and any additional debt after that would require an increase to the mill levy. And then you can see on the subsequent two slides what that would look like on an annual basis with the debt service detail for the 20-year and then the 13. And then you can see what that would look like for a single $8 million issue at a 20-year term, and then a single $8 million issue at a 13-year term, which would be the minimum that you could spend, minimum time that you could pay that off. So the next section is just the $6 million issues that were already reviewed at two prior meetings. If you want me to go through that, I can, but there's no changes there. That just basically presents the same information. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. There's also a packet, passed around into the packet was a timing calendar that the Rohde Law Firm put together, showing all the steps that would need to happen between now and the election and slightly thereafter in order to move this forward. As you can see, we have up until the 28th in order to get the bond question finalized and the ballot finalized and over to the Secretary of State. So we still have a teeny bit of time, not much. It's kind of closing in on us. I'll answer questions, and then if anybody wants to talk about a market, hear about a market overview, I'm happy to do that as well.
Just for clarity, I wanted the county manager, Webb, it's your recommendation that we go with the $6 million contract.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I don't know if this is a question for our advisor or maybe our assessor, but if we chose not to do the $6 million, or if the public chose not to vote for the $6 million, how much would property taxes go down for a $100,000 house? Do we have any idea? Yeah, that's a question I'm gonna be asked, so I'd like to know.
Good question.
So based on the current, annual debt service, if you slide over to page 5, when you look at the outstanding, general obligation debt, you can see that the total annual aggregate debt service will drop from, that 931,000 down to 621, down to 422, which is a substantial decrease, which would take you to about, a half a mil, or 0.6 mils. So on...
Currently
at 1.138. So it would be a little bit less than half of what it is right now.
That needs to be clarified. That's not total tax bill, right? That's the debt service millage?
That's the debt service millage, that's
So
correct.
the question was about what would be the impact on the total tax bill. It sounds like it'd be roughly half a mil.
That's correct.
And a $100,000 house has a taxable value of $33,000, right? So if it were a full mil, we're talking about, I believe, $330, so half a mil, $165, $150. $165. If I've done my math right, which I'm hoping.
A full mill would be about $33 per
So it's
$100,000, so it would be about half that, so not a huge impact to property taxes.
Okay. So go down by $15 or $16.
$16 change for that 6 million books. That's the kind of thing we're gonna be asked, and that's an easy answer, yes. For 100,000.
Great question.
You're gonna,
3 lattes.
you buy lattes at different places than I do. Oh, wait, I don't buy lattes.
I don't either. Mr. Chair?
5 half blue ribbons.
PBR.
On the different terms, so if we go out, say we make the decision to go for the $8 million on the 20-year term, but we have the financial capacity to pay it off in the 13-year increments part of the time. So the way I look at this, and I am far from an expert in thinking about this kind of stuff, the way I look at it is if we do the 20-year, then we have a cushion, right? Because we are not maximizing. And so if we want to preserve that cushion by going out for the 20-year, but we have the capacity in some years to pay the payment that the 13-year would require, is there a penalty for doing that?
It depends on how the issue is structured at the time of issuance. So a standard prepayment penalty is a 10-year call. So anything, paying any additional principal before 10 years would incur a penalty, or it just simply wouldn't be allowed. But depending on rates at the time, you could buy that down to 5 or, no prepayment penalty at all. So that's really negotiable depending on the needs of the county at the time. There would be a premium for it. That would be priced in at the time of the market, but that can definitely be arranged. But then after that 10-year period, if you do have a 10-year call, you would be free to pay it down whenever. So you could accumulate the additional amount in a debt service reserve fund and then pay it all down at one go.
Thank you.
Further question?
Well, I'm ready to move on to the needs. I mean, I just have this impression from our discussion of highways and from our discussion of ICIP that we do have the needs.
What are we gonna pay for with the $6 million?
Or the 8 or the 10.
10 or the 12.
I think that they're ready to talk about 6, because that was the proposal from the management.
Okay, I think I'm on now. Chairman and Commissioners, so I have every intent to send you the ICIP today. I've got it pretty well written up and for you guys to decide on priorities so that we can get it approved at the August meeting. But I have printed out a copy so I can discuss certain items that are on here. So we already know that the roof requires, in order to use the bond, a complete roof replacement. So on the Silver Street Complex roof, the estimate that we have is $166,000 for replacement. That's one of the items. The Grant County Administration Building Group, that's this one here. The lowest bid that we've seen, but it is still contingent upon what they find. There's some soft spots up there, so they need more decking that'll have to be replaced. $393,000. When we look at just the basic information that we have on, which is widening school bus routes and the county arterial improvements. For widening school bus routes at between 800 and 880,000 per mile. That's what I've got down per year over the 5 years. So $880,000 each year for 5 years. That would be if we already have the right of way in existence without doing any planning or design. That's just the basic cost that we're doing a new paving job. For the county,
I'm sorry.
1 mile. Yes, I'm sorry, so 1 mile.
So we would do 1 mile a year at an approximate cost of $880,000.
Approximately $880,000. That's what I have on the ICIP, and that's to make sure that we have it on the ICIP. It's kind of one of those blanket ones that we talked about. But that's so if we can afford to do more, we would do more. That's again just school bus routes and widening the school bus routes. On the county arterial improvements, I've got $1,020,000 per year, but that's also going to be about a mile because we do know that there's a potential for the need for acquisition and engineering on those.
And that was how much, Mike?
That's still the same cost of between $800,000 and $880,000 per mile, but I added in some planning and engineering costs to that, so it ends up being $1,020,000 per year over the 5 years. Again, to just have it on the ICIP.
$1,020,000.
$1,020,000.
Does the per mile cost change if you do more miles at a time because of mobilization?
We're just going off the estimates from what we have seen from the jobs that we've done, and they've all been about a mile and a half jobs. Yeah. So I assume that if we did more, having them mobilized would definitely bring the cost down, and there's ways of doing some internal based on Earl's ability to mill and do base cores, but again, that's... He's already told me, but it's based on his ability and the workload demand that he already has on that. So he does do a lot of that for some of our colonial projects to help keep the cost down, but I think if we get into some routine, it's going to have to be on a need for the contractor to do it. Now, I will tell you that Earl has this also because one of the things that we wanted to discuss is, what's a specific project that we could be looking at. And we've had lots of discussion about the Walnut Road and the need to make a bike path, walking path, that kind of stuff on it. So, rough estimate, and I don't have the exact, but about 3 miles. From the county line to picnic grounds, which is what is currently county paved roadway. And again, this is very dependent on the right-of-way, which I do have on the budget to have done this year. So assuming that we have enough right-of-way out there, we don't have to try to acquire any lands. Preliminary engineering is, well, I'll just give you the total project cost. Total project cost $2.7 million. So if we were to take that one project on with this proposal for the mill levy or geo bond, sorry, not mill levy, geo bond renewal, you're looking at $2.7 million right away just for that project, if that's one that gets identified.
And so then you'd have 880,000 times whatever's left over to do other routes.
Correct.
So the little Walnut Road then would be, so there would be access to the Continental Divide Trail and bike access as well.
That's what we'd be looking at on that project specifically. And again, that's putting a lot of eggs in the basket that our right-of-way is going to say we have enough room to do it. Because once we get into acquisition, sky's the limit on that.
So if we put this on the ballot and then we are not able to acquire all the right of way we need, then what?
Well, that increases the cost per mile.
Yeah. So we have to find the money somewhere else.
Right, and that's why I say I want to give examples of some projects that we can do versus specifics. Right. Because if we specifically said, we're going to do Little Walnut, and then we find out that it's not possible to do, what do we do then?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I think we can still do Little Walnut, we just may not be able to do the widening that we would like to do, because the roadway still needs to be done. Several roads that we have that need to be reconstructed. Fortunately, most of them are 2 or 3 miles long.
Now, the Little Walnut project in particular, when we've talked about it in the Trails group, needs cooperation from the city, because they've got a long stretch of that as well.
Right, so this would only be the county line out, so there would still be that stretch within the city limits that would not have a path on it, where the city had to end their bike path just past Los Barrios.
Have we had made any progress with them in terms of agreeing to work on this as a priority?
It's just still in discussions. They've kind of got they know that they've got right-of-way issues on their part. So they're the ones that have a pretty expensive estimate. I think somewhere around $8 million is the last that I heard, and I haven't seen anything in writing on that, but that's because they do know that they don't have enough right-of-way to be able to put that path all the way through, so they would have to work something out to acquire lands. I don't know that that's a priority for them. I think it's too much money.
County line is at King Road, correct?
It's just past Trail Ridge.
Trail Ridge, between Trail Ridge and King.
It's past Trail Ridge.
Further questions for Mr.
Well, I don't know if you made it through the list. I interrupted you.
So, if we, let's see, okay, so we've got just another example of airport runway construction, because that's been another one that we've been talking about. That's on the ICIP. That's a $22 million is the estimate for that. We've got the Tyrone Town Site ADA, which is the making all of the sidewalks ADA compliant. We have the design, engineering design is complete on that. Cost estimates $919,264. If we look at the parking lot, which has been discussed several times here at the administration building, I'm waiting on some new numbers based on the price of oil, but the old number was $232,000. We've got, I've got on here the Grant County Trails and Open Space Master Plan, which is $100,000. We've talked about that several times. Fire Department in Hachita, we're looking at about $620,000 with design, with the current cost estimates, although we're working with a new company on that.
What was that figure? 220?
No, 620.
620.
I'm going to clarify that there's a money source, there's a funding source for that.
Right, that one there is a money source.
So do you want to hear, so I guess, do you want to hear all of the projects on the ICIP, or those that we've identified that we could utilize the bond funds for? So let's talk about what we've identified that we're looking at, that the $6 million for the roads and 2 for buildings would go to.
So I've talked about the roads, and then given one specific example. And again, the roads, based on those costs, if we look at taking a dirt road or a gravel road, the cost is significantly less for full reconstruction, but we need to identify those roads that would make the most sense to do. So mainly what I've got on the ICIP is to talk about our facilities, to show that with the $6 million, we're doing $4 million for roads and $2 million for facilities. So a couple of more facilities that could fall under that is the community center in Gila, New Mexico, $350,000. The Cliff Gila Grant County Fairgrounds water system, completely redoing the water system, estimates around $250,000. That's a new well. The courthouse roof, which we still have on there, is $285,000. We have new ADA bleachers for the county fair facility at $100,000. I don't know that we can do this, but I'm going to throw it out there because it is for the road department, the Grant County Road Department equipment, $376,000, and that's the dump trucks, sweeper, and a roller.
376?
376. Grant County Airport Terminal today. What's that?
And we don't know if those can be funded with GO bonds.
Yeah, that I don't. So good.
We would need to check with Rhodey. My inclination is to say yes, those can be funded, but I would hesitate to say that without confirmation from bond council, but we can check with that.
Misha?
Yes.
Going back to the gravel road real quick, do you have a per mile cost on that?
I do, and I didn't print it out, but I will get it to you. We've got it on the asset management plan that's it's still being worked on.
Solar piece, you know, talk about that?
Yes, I do.
The solar piece?
Yeah.
I need to print those numbers out too, off the top of my head.
We could give you a minute to do that if you like.
Okay, if I can go print that out.
And the solar piece, there were a couple options, and so you're referring to the option where we fund it ourselves.
I can talk specifically towards the energy audit and the portion that we pulled out, which is the phase 2, which has a majority of the solar on it. That's I think 2.4 million on that one. You know, and so that's the phase 2 that we won't even have enough to do the complete phase 2 if we do the 4 and 2 million.
And this is one of the reasons I'm looking at the 4 and the 4. It seems to me this is a favorable way to finance it compared to paying them to finance it. But that's one of the decisions we have to make. I don't know if you were going to address that. Because they gave us the option of them financing, basically, right? Or us financing. It seems to me this is a favorable option.
If I may, regarding the energy savings performance contract, one of the reasons why, and Misha can speak to this in a little bit more detail, one of the reasons why that project was reduced so substantially is we were looking at how much of the project actually was generating energy savings and could pay for itself. And so a lot of the solar projects were tied to some of these roof replacement projects and involved a lot of elements that did not directly generate savings, and it impacted the ability of the project to pay for itself over time. So we identified around $1.8 to $2 million worth of projects that do pay for themselves within a 23 to 25 year time frame, and then the rest of those projects, to the extent that they're still a priority for the county, could be paid for out of general obligation bond funding.
So I guess I need to clarify that. Let's say we're talking about the Grant County Administration Building. There was an idea of maybe putting panels on the roof here, and it turned out that the roof, of course, needed some work, partly to do that. You're saying that when we included the cost of the work on the roof in the cost of the energy project, it made the energy project not pay for itself.
That's correct.
Which, to me, is not the right way to analyze it, because we need to replace the roof anyway. Right? So that cost we're doing to maintain the building so it doesn't leak. And if you're evaluating the additional cost to then add solar panels, it's that additional cost that needs to pay for itself.
So the way the state and Department of Energy and Minerals looks at these guaranteed savings projects is that there needs to be a positive cash flow on an annual basis based on the installed cost of all of the improvements as amortized over the life of the guaranteed savings contract versus M&V, which is maintenance and verification costs, and also taking out the debt service. So all of that on an annual basis has to have a positive cash flow in order for Department of Energy and Minerals to even consider approving it as a guaranteed savings contract. So it's not that these projects can't be done and that they don't necessarily have some savings involved, but when you add on substantial elements like replacement of a roof, which is extremely expensive and generates no savings in itself, it just makes the numbers not work at the end of the day. So it limits which projects can be included in the scope.
And Chairman Commissioner Brown, I'd also like to point out that their initial estimates for this building, they did not take into consideration the cost of the roof replacement. That was a determination as we were inspecting the roof, and they wanted to still put the solar on, which if we went with the full project, there was a $2 million cost to the county because the debt service or the energy savings wouldn't pay for the whole project. And they hadn't even considered the roof on this one. In discussions with Jason said this roof would not work to try to put solar on it the way it exists, and then try to take that solar back off to replace the roof the way that it needs to be done. So we had to take into consideration. That's why we started working on getting some of the costs outside of that project for the roof. So they didn't take the roof into consideration on this one. They did take the roof into consideration on Silver Street, but they have since pulled it. And we've since told them that's not a viable solution for us. We're again not going to put solar on the Silver Street complex and then have to pull it off to replace the roof. It doesn't make any sense to us. So we're in the process of trying to rework that to make sure that that's analyzed.
And in that process of reworking it, I hope you're looking at the cost savings involved in doing the two projects at the same time, as opposed to first fixing the roof and then coming back.
Yes.
Okay, because that's my concern. If we miss that opportunity, we're wasting some money.
Right, and I have the roof on the ICIP for the Silver Street complex because I need to get the ICIP out. If we're able to get it absorbed into the project where it's all done at the same time, great. That's fantastic.
And I guess this could just be a really stupid departmental policy. Maybe that's what you're saying, but if we have an estimate for fixing a roof, and we want to save money by putting a solar project on it at the same time, are you saying that Energy Minerals can't just look at the marginal cost of adding the energy component? They have to include the reconstruction component as well?
If you're looking at it as a single project, so if you're including the roof in the project scope of the energy, if it's tied to the solar, if you look at the solar separately, it pays for itself. But if you add in the cost of the roofing and you amortize that over like 25 years or whatever the useful life of that component is, then the project doesn't work. So you kind of need to treat them separately.
Exactly, and will NRD allow us to treat them separately is the question?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Right, so right now what we're working with NG is the phase 1 project can actually sustain itself. So that's the part that we're looking at moving forward. We're just tweaking the roof portion for the Silver Street complex. The phase 2 portion is something that I think we can do internally, and then we don't have to have the Energy Minerals Natural Resources Division look at it because
we don't need the guarantee.
Right.
Right. Excellent. I like that approach.
Yeah. So hopefully that clears that portion of it.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me still feel like $8 million is the right number. Both those things.
At some point in this conversation, I'd like to hear from the county manager why she has proposed, why county manager has proposed the $6 million. That's what I'm comfortable with, and I'm not comfortable with going out on my own or the commission going on its own different than what county management has proposed.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, basically it goes back to my overly conservative nature, that I feel that going out with the $6 million projects that we feel that we can identify, then we give the public the reassurance that we will do what we say we're going to do, that we can take the $6 million and spend it accordingly and show them that we've made good use of their tax dollars. And it's like the conversation I've had, your opinion is I'm overly conservative, and I probably am. But I also like that this is paid off in 10 years, and that we're not extending debt out any further than we have to. So those are my basic reasons for sticking to my initial recommendation of going to for a total of $6 million, not extending the term over 10 years.
So clarifying question, so if we go with 8, it has to be 20?
No. She just presented different options.
The $8 million option can be paid off in 13 years.
Well, 13, okay.
There's no, I think we got a 13, we got a 15.
But that doesn't allow you to add on any additional debt without increasing the population.
And that's the key, we can't add additional debt later. For instance, GRMC's made it clear with their press conference that they weren't ready for the money now, but it'd probably take them, and thank you for that article, Ben, because that's where I'm getting my information. It would probably take them a year to identify needs, and at that point, a year or two, whatever it is, we need to go out for that, and we'd have no more capacity if we took the 13-year option with the $8 million.
We have $30 million more capacity. It's just that we would have to raise the number.
Without raising taxes.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily look someone in the eye and say, your bill's going to go up $50 to, in a year to fix the hospital. That to me wouldn't stop me from helping the hospital get itself fixed up.
And I would appreciate that, except that GRC's made it clear they've presented their long-term strategic plan, and I think we should allow them to turn it around and be self-sufficient. They're saying they can, and they can generate their own capital through that $7 to $11 million that they're going to make. I'm fearful if we start dibbling money out to them, then it's going to be hard to hold them accountable for that plan that they presented. Not that we presented, it's their plan.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. That's not why I'm asking for the 8. I was trying to make that clear. I support the second, not the third. The third option presented to us included $2 million specifically for the hospital. I don't think any of us is talking about doing that at this point.
Okay.
The 8 that you're proposing is an additional $2 million for things that are on the ICIP.
Yes, and maybe things that aren't like a county trail, open space trail, maybe that is on it. Technically, that is on it. Okay. What's that?
Can it be 2 issues?
You could do it in a single issue or in 2 separate issues.
And that is on page 15 and...
So it starts on page 15, and so that's for the 20-year term, 2 separate issues. That page 16 shows 2 separate issues with a 13-year term, which is the minimum time frame to be paid off in. And then if you skip past the 2 detail slides, you can see what that looks like for a single $8 million issue on a 20-year term on slide 19. And then on slide 20, you can see what a single $8 million issue looks like over 13 years.
So I have a couple of more clarifying questions here. So, with all due respect for your desire to stay within the $6 million, so 2 things. One would be, let's say we go out for the 6, but then we decide in relatively short order that we wish we would have done the 8 because we really need that other $2 million worth of projects. How would we do that? Could we, so we're talking about doing 2 issuances of $3 million apiece, correct?
Correct.
So if we go out for one at 3 and then we decide that we wish we had done 8 total, is it possible to add the $2 million to the second issuance?
So you would have to, so you're saying, let me just clarify your question. So you're asking if you ask the voters to authorize $6 million and then within a year or 2 you realize that you need $2 million more. You would have to go back out to the voters to request the additional $2 million authorization, but depending on how you structure those $2-3 million issues, you could potentially leave yourself enough capacity to be able to do that $2 million additional issuance at that time should the need arise.
Without going to the voters?
Either way, it would require one.
Without raising,
Either way it goes, okay.
without raising the mill rate is really what that meant.
Right, okay. So, I just knocked the second question right out of my head. No, we'll go back.
So, and your question gets to one of the advantages I see of going to 8, which is, I think voters get saturated with bond questions more easily than they get saturated with the amount of one bond question. Does that make sense? You want to keep seeing a bond question every single time on the ballot.
Yep.
Further questions or discussion? Do you have anything, Mr. Castro? Do you have
So we could do either 6 or 8 in 3 and 3 and 4 and 4 in 10 years, correct?
8 was 13 years.
8 is 13.
Without raising the mill rate.
Get that out of my head.
And I don't know why we ruled it myself. I mean, this is another question that we could discuss. A 4 1/4 rate, pretty darn good for a 20-year bond. It's hard for me to pass that up. Part of why I'm seeing 8. What's that? That's an estimated rate. It is, of course, but I guess we have to trust our bond advisors at some point to be able to estimate. How confident are you in 4 1/4?
And that's based on current market expectations. Obviously, we're a bit below that right now. We're probably looking at 3.5 to 3.6 right now, and so that kind of just gives us a little bit of a cushion between now and first quarter of next year or first quarter of 2019, depending on how much the market moves. And right now we're seeing some conflicting market indicators. Last week we got a lot of market data. GDP did really well. It rose by 4.2% for the quarter. Business inventories are down, meaning that sales are up. Consumer spending rose by like 4%. Business spending rose by like 7%. So we're seeing a lot of really strong indicators in the economy, but then on the other hand, we're also seeing strong inflationary indicators. And what that means for rates is that, as the Fed has been increasing the federal borrowing rate, it puts some upward pressure on short-term rates, and so we're looking at a very flat yield curve right now, and the difference between short-term and long-term yields is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and this gives rise to a couple of fears in the market. So we're seeing like really, really strong GDP indicators on the one hand, but then on the other hand, a flat yield curve, it typically turns into an inverted yield curve. And over the past, since 1960, we've had 8 recessions, and every single recession has been preceded by an inverted yield curve. And so the market is watching very, very carefully to see what rates are going to do between now and then, because that'll determine how the Fed reacts, what rate, if there's inflationary pressure that continues to hike things up or if it's going to stay steady. But right now, we're seeing things very, very steady. I think we've seen a record 22 sessions without more than a 7 basis point change in either direction. So now everything's very, very calm, very flat. It's going to really depend on what happens with trade wars, what happens with the macro global economic scene. So it's just kind of a wait and see, but that's kind of our best guess as to where the market's going to move based on how steady everything has been that we've seen so far. And if we do move into an inverted yield curve environment, still borrowing out into the longer part of the curve, into the 20-year time frame, is still going to be beneficial, because we're not going to see a huge drop in interest rates, and we're probably not going to see a huge rise in interest rates out into the long end of the curve either. So I'm sorry if that was kind of long and convoluted, but just to give you a perspective on how we're thinking about the market today.
So, we're going to actually talk about the dollar amount today. We're going in the resolution, is that correct? So there's a couple of things that I would like to have before I'm going to be ready to make a decision. I want to do a little back of the envelope math. I'd like to know what the per mile gravel cost is.
Is there any other discussion or questions while we're waiting?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, sure.
If we do this conservatively now, and we have a recession in the next year or two, how would that work? I'm not even entirely sure what my question is here, but there's a lot of things on this list that we need to pay attention to. Given the current market situation, is it better to get those things on, funded now rather than waiting? Is there any way to say that?
So the advice, there's a couple of ways to answer that. So first of all, let me just preface this by saying, even if you were to go out to the voters for like full $8 million, there's nothing that requires you to issue a full $8 million. So if you issue $4 million and then you see, we're not spending it down as quickly as we should, or, you don't have to issue the rest of it. So you're not bound to that issuance. You could issue up to $8 million. I know that wasn't your question. But the indications that we're seeing from our desk at this point is we're still looking at a rising rate environment by all indications. The Fed has already committed to raising rates again in September and 3 more times in 2019. Again, will they do that? It depends on inflationary pressures and some other of those market indicators that we were talking about. But based on that, the advice that's coming out from our desk right now is to lock in these low rates for as long as possible. So I don't know if that sheds some light on the indicators. So, there's a huge market for swaps and hedging type instruments to hedge against future rate hikes. So, by all indications, the market is expecting interest rates to rise in the near future.
And that being said, they said the same exact thing in 2006, and rates went to nearly nothing for 8 years, so.
We should always realize we don't know.
Right.
If you think you do, you probably should do it.
Do you have that information?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, on the asset management plan for gravel, complete reconstruction is $125,000 per mile.
You don't even have an envelope to write.
I have so many things happen in my brain.
Oh, this is maintenance. That's complete reconstruction. Okay. I'm looking at something that says 40,000 for good, but that's just maintenance instead of reconstruction. Is that the difference?
Chairman, Commissioner Brown, I believe that was the re-gravel cost, and some of the rework numbers have it at about $62,500 now.
I see it now. Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Did you have in mind some stretch of gravel that is high priority?
No, I just wanted to have an idea in my mind about what we were talking about.
The thing that I remember from the asset management plan was some very scary figure about, I don't know what to call it, investment needs. Wasn't it, on the order of 17 million or something?
Chairman, Commissioner Brown, it was pretty high. If we look at all of the roads and looking at the level of service that the asset management plan has identified as the expected level of service by the constituents, it was pretty high. I think somewhere around that cost at a per year estimate. Now, of course, that's, that can be adjusted and changed based on tier and movement, and does the level of service need to change? So that's where this toolkit that they've been working on comes into play, and what we'll be able to work with. Kind of gives you guys some talking points also.
Mostly Commissioner Billings and, somewhat Commissioner Caston's district, so more than mine.
Redo the whole 700 miles would be about $87 million. That's not really an option.
Yeah, and having to weigh that out and making,
There was his third.
at what point do you want to take, to go against management's recommendation? Sure, I'd like to see some more roads fixed up. There's no assurance that would happen, and that's going to mean that we're going to be less conservative, and so I'd have to weigh out my constituents. I know they want their roads fixed up. I know they want their taxes low. I know they want us to be so. That's why I would default with management's decision. Any further discussion? Is there, are we ready for a motion now?
Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the second of the three proposals that calls for $4 million for roads, $4 million for facilities.
Second.
Does that have a term in it, or are we going to vote on the term later?
I don't believe the bond language does it? That's a good
No, but that
question.
would be helpful for staff, for you to determine.
I'd be happy to discuss it. I'm still believing that 20 is the best option. It keeps our options open later. It locks in the lower rate, even though we don't know what's going to happen. One way to control uncertainty is to lock in favorable conditions. And I would support locking it in for 20 years. That's my way of thinking about finance.
And what would be the con of, what would be a reason to not lock it in for 20 years?
Obviously, you would be carrying debt for a much longer period of time, and this commission would be, saddling the next commission and your successors with substantial debt over a substantial period of time.
Okay.
Always a downside.
We haven't been scared of that before, so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is the motion clear? We're talking about a 20-year.
There was a potential amendment to include a length of time, and for some reason, I haven't found the language just now.
If I may, the bond question itself does not contain any language pertaining to term limits. Statute allows you to go up to 20 years. That's the only limit. The limit would be decided internally and does not have to be decided now.
And that's a management decision, is that what you're telling me?
No, it's not a management decision, it's your decision, but I just thought we could have that discussion now, and then it's all resolved, and you decide to go 4 and 4 for 20 years, for 13 years, then I know what your decision is. I don't have to bring it back to you again. We can move forward, start educating the public that we're looking at a 20-year term, we're looking at a 13-year term, then it's all decided today, we move on.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would encourage Commissioner Brown to do those in separate motions.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor? Aye. And those opposed? I'm opposed.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move that the bonds be issued for 20-year terms in 2 tranches of $4 million each.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that,
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So, looking at your curve there, showing that you have the debt service, I'm not sure because I haven't seen what this is, but is there any possibility that the state would say you have your debt service at the level that, you, in other words, where they would lower because we have such a gap? That's what I'm seeing there. As far as I know.
Let me take you to what's being voted on. This is So this is the 13-year term, and this is the 20-year term right here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, with the gap for the 20-year versus the gap for the 13-year, or what have you, what is the possibility that whoever, DFA or whoever it is, determines our levy, or debt service ratio, or whatever it is?
Right. So under this issuance scenario, you wouldn't be facing that question until FY 2023-24. And then at that point, if the county decides that it does not need to issue further debt, the levy could be lowered at that time. Or you could go out to voters to ask them to sustain the debt levy at the current level and issue additional debt against that levy.
Can I just make that a little, maybe more common sense? In that year you're referring to, we retired the Series 2014 debt.
That's absolutely correct.
And so we would be asking the voters to replace a new series, right, to replace 2014
That's correct.
with a new series.
That's correct.
But we would not have to do that.
Absolutely, and it might not even be us.
Okay, we have a motion, a second on the floor, discussion?
I thought Brett had some discussion.
Yes.
No, I just didn't want those motions together, because
Okay.
My discussion on this, and why I'll vote against it, is because I don't think the commission should, it's just too untimely and arbitrary to set that 20-year period. I think that warrants more direction from your firm and from county management again.
Her firm gave us their direction.
What's that?
I thought her firm gave us I think she called it bench advice to lock in favorable rates as long as possible. I'm not saying I would always agree with what her firm's advice is, but I do in this case.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, if I may, there's, by the time that this issue passes, obviously we'll be in the fourth quarter, whether we know whether or not the issue passes or that voters have given authorization, we'll be in the fourth quarter, and the market could look substantially different at that time. Because just, keep in mind that, by voting today, you're not actually issuing or locking in rates today, so you wouldn't actually be issuing debt until the first quarter of 2019. So we could be faced with a very different market environment in the first quarter of 2019. It's hard to tell. So, if the commission votes to go with a 20-year term at this juncture, you can always amend that decision later, and that gives us some direction to do the legwork and proceed, on a 20-year basis. But if the market changes between now and when we actually go to public market for this issue, obviously our advice will change with the dynamics of the fluctuating market.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. Motion fails.
so in lieu of that, I move to issue those 2 bonds for 13-year terms.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And no opposed. Motion carries. Okay, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Can we take a 5-minute break? Okay. All in favor? 5-minute recess. Okay, we're out of recess and we're on agenda item D. Approve or disapprove resolution R-1820, fiscal year 2018 final budget adjustment. Manager. Linda? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, members of the board, present you with the final budget adjustment for fiscal year ending June 30, 2018. With this budget adjustment, I'm requesting to do a temporary cash transfer from the general fund into the Senior Services Vehicle Grant in the amount of $43,595. And this is to cover for the reimbursement request that we didn't receive by the end of June. And also included is a cash transfer in the amount of $5,000 from the Grant County Fire Admin into Regional Dispatch, and this is an agreement that's been made by the Grant County Admin to assist in the dispatch and communications costs. Also included is an increase in the airport fund in the amount of $240,560, and this is an increase to the fuel sales, in the revenue portion of the fuel sales. And then there's also an increase in expenses into the airport for the fuel line item in the amount of $132,850, and an increase in the administrative fees for the 2014 series revenue bonds in the amount of $245. And again, this is just to have our year-end closing fiscal year 2018 budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move to approve R 1820.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Agenda item E, approve or disapprove resolution R 1821 fiscal year 2018 fourth quarter financial report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you have the fourth quarter, the final financial report for fiscal year 2018, and I will go over the general fund, the correction fund, the airport, and the road. In the general fund, we began with the beginning cash balance at July 1, 2017 of $3,566,077. We received $14,291,018 in revenues. We had a transfer out of $4,253,675 with expenses of $9,358,622. This left us with an ending cash balance of $4,244,788. In the road fund, which is Fund 204, we started with a beginning balance of $144,108. Revenues received was $1,055,935. We had transfers in of $680,729 with expenses of $1,673,296. And that left us with an ending cash balance of $207,476. In the correction fund, which is 226, Fund 226. It's jail detention fund. We had a beginning cash balance of $152,730. We had revenues of $808,249 with transfers in of $1,862,000 and expenses of $2,436,904, leaving us an ending cash balance of $386,075. The airport fund, which is in the enterprise fund, 500. We started with a cash balance of $238. We had revenues of $848,045 and transfers of $219,139, leaving expenses of $870,146, leaving us with a balance of $189,276. So overall, with all the funds, including special revenue and capital projects, grants, fire departments, water tax, all the funds, the total revenues is $29,231,124, expenses of $29,333,111, leaving us with an ending cash balance of $13,023,052.
Any questions for that? Motion?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve resolution number R 1821.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We're at agenda item Roman numeral 6, budget hearing. Item F, discussion regarding the Grant County budget for fiscal year 2018-19.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the proposed final budget has been submitted to you. The ending cash balance is what I just described to you, with above our budgeted amount. What we saw was additional revenues from property tax, village GRT, and for the first time in Linda's recollection, we received the admin fees from Corey Caminos, which we have never received. I would like to offer my thanks to Randy and his staff for getting Corey Caminos turned around, and we have paid that debt off. I would like to thank the elected officials and the staff for bearing with me through this process. As you can see, the available cash and Commissioner Brown, my overly conservative budgeting methods, it's a little more comforting to have an available cash balance in the event that we have emergencies, in the event that PILT or SRS goes away, or we see a reduction. Just a reminder, Copper Works 3 years in arrears, so we are seeing what happened 3 years ago, not what's currently happening in the copper industry. So the reliance of both of those has caused me to be overly cautious. Being overly cautious for the past 3 years has allowed us to present this budget, which has unfrozen the 3 positions in the clerk's office, the road department, and in the assessor's office. We were able to budget a 1.5% COLA for employees. We were able to budget $140,000 for the parcel mapping correction project, which is necessary. We were able to budget for some required maintenance, some sewer equipment for the detention center and for the town park. Most everyone was able to see some sort of non-capital purchases as far as like printers, computer equipment. We were able to finally budget some needed equipment for our IT department. And some of the changes, Linda can go into this in further detail. We're slowly able to separate out some of the expenditures. For example, in this budget, we've separated out the IT expenses to where we have an IT department where we can better track these expenses. They've been sort of lumped into different line items. When you go back and try to really drill down on where things were spent, it's really difficult to do that. So Linda and her staff has done a great job of separating those out so we can better account for those expenditures. I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to say. As you can see too, what we're showing with all of those and those long-needed things addressed, like the COLA, giving those departments back their positions, we're able to see a $396,000 surplus above our 312 requirement. That gives the finance department and myself a little more comfort knowing that we do have that money available in the event of emergency. Want to go over the details of the 3 major departments? Sure. And if you need it, if not,
is that needed?
I would appreciate it. I don't know if it's needed or not, but I feel like this is one of the most important things we do.
Okay. In the current property taxes, we increased it $47,810 in the from the 2018 final budget.
Can I interrupt you for a moment? Sure. I'm sorry. I think I have why do we compare the increase to the previous year's budget instead of to the previous year's actuals, which we now know?
I'm sorry, that is the actuals, I'm sorry.
You said it was an increase of 47.8, which is true if you compare it to the budget from the previous year. But if you,
the column that says 2018 final,
yeah,
those are actuals.
So the 2017-2018 total activity, I thought that was the actual.
You know what, I may be wrong there.
I believe that's the final budget, the one
It
you're
did,
talking
it
about.
picked up the final budget
Yeah.
rather than, the
And it
actual.
did that the previous year. So I don't know how that's going to affect your report, but I feel like what's valuable to me is a comparison of our budget for the coming year to what we actually spent or actually took in the previous year. Does that make
It
sense?
does make sense.
I think that's reflected in your quarterly report, and then rolling into the recap, I think you can see that summarized by fund. You want it by
You want.
So spreadsheets are miraculous in that they make it so easy to compare a variety of different things. If you're suggesting that I could go to the other report and then compare those things to this, I'm sure I could, but it would be vastly easier either to add a column or to replace the 2017-2018 final budget column, the comparison there, with a comparison to actual expenditures.
Okay, we can work on this. This is a software-generated report. It's not a spreadsheet that we can simply control. And it's obviously very difficult to get it to pull the right columns. So this isn't a spreadsheet that we just say, do this, do this, do this. It's not an Excel spreadsheet. It's a software-driven report. We've had some issues with, we can sync that into an Excel spreadsheet, but it's not pulling the data properly at this point in time. And unfortunately, this is due in DFA's office this week, so I don't know that we have the time to be able to provide that explicit of detail to you today. Hopefully you would take our word that we've done the right thing.
Okay, if what Linda was ready to do was compare, was just read what's already on here, then I don't need that to happen. What I interpreted, the suggestion was that she was going to do something that would compare the budget to what we'd actually just gone through as a fiscal year. In that case, there's no need to go over it because we are all looking at it. But I guess I want my fellow commissioners to be clear, and I want to know if you see an issue other than the technological one of working with the producer of this report. Hopefully, people realize it makes more sense to compare budget we're about to approve with what we actually did last year, not with what we budgeted last year, right? That makes, okay.
Yeah.
So, and it makes a big difference because some of these are shown as increases that in fact are decreases. Some of them are shown as not changing at all, when in fact there's a $500,000 difference. But it makes a big difference in some cases. All right. In that case, I guess we could just go to question.
Okay, Mr. Brown, may I just add that when I do develop the final budget, or any budget for that matter, what I do is I export what is called a grid from Tyler to show the actuals, and that's how I make the budget based off of the actual. So this number that's being approved as the final
Yeah.
is in comparison to the actual that I do.
So you do the same thing I would do?
Yes.
That's all I'm saying, that we should do.
Yes,
We should
I do.
and we as commissioners should see that.
And I'll see if we can work on this report so that it'll be visible to the commissioners.
That would be great.
Are there any further questions or comments?
I have some questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was waiting for a report I thought might explain it. And I want to clarify, not every conservative decision is overly conservative, right? I really don't want us to get into that kind of relationship. I greatly appreciate a lot of our fiscal conservatism. So you and I talked, fiscal restraint, you and I talked early on about the need to get that cash carryover up, and I agreed completely. So don't think that when I think you're overly conservative on bonding, that I also think you're being overly conservative about everything here. On the other hand, I don't see anything in Washington right now suggesting that PILT is going to be cut. Everything seems to have moved the other direction. And yet we're suggesting that PILT will be reduced by 25%.
What we budgeted was what we were supposed to get from PILT, and that was we were pleasantly surprised for PILT to have increased. That doesn't always happen. Usually we get right at what we budgeted and what they have anticipated to have. This year was an increase in PILT funding. That doesn't always happen, so we're not going to bank on that again. Having just had a conversation with a representative from the Department of Interior on Friday, they are looking at the PILT formula, and they are looking at making changes to the PILT formula. If they are successful in making those changes, I think it will be more beneficial to us, because what they will be doing is possibly looking at factoring in the population of counties with a high amount of federal acres, which would be Catherine County, Grant County, Sierra County. So yes, you're probably right. However, I think that is a very risky move when you're reliant on what's happening at the federal level to budget at $2.5 million rather than the 2. So that's why we went with the conservative figure for PILT for $2 million. And also remember that Superior Rural Schools was only authorized for 2 years. So in 2 years, we could be back in the same boat we were in last year and lose that significant amount of revenue as well.
It's a scary, Mr. Chairman, it's a scary proposition to have to budget for something that you're not even going to know what's going to be for, it's 11 months from now, is when you find out what it's truly going to be. So I have no problem budgeting conservatively for PILT.
And the class action lawsuit proceeds, those aren't in here anywhere, is that right? Because we don't know when those would
No, we
happen.
don't know when that would happen, and that was just an estimate that was provided to us.
That makes sense.
Further questions, discussion? Yes, sir.
I move to approve R 1822.
Second?
And I did have a question, the capital outlay on information technology. The 31,000, do we have a plan for that? We just think we might need something.
No, there's a plan for that. What we did is we took all of the requests, capital requests for other departments that were IT-related, computers, printers. We need some switches, computers, so that's all lumped together. So, for example, Steve needs printers for his office. That's actually been removed from his department, put into IT so that we can better track when those printers were purchased, keep up with the warranties, those sort of things, because now it's sort of a nightmare to track. So that's what that 31,000 is. Those are all identified needs, not just a lump sum figure thrown together.
And I think it's a great idea to have put it into IT so we can see it that way. I really appreciate that you did that. You mentioned the 1.5% COLA. We had also discussed, I guess there was just one position that was being changed in the compensation plan. That's incorporated in this as well, I assume. It's changed. Is there, we had discussed very briefly this idea of trying to move to the mid-range, people who are at the lower ends. Is that contemplated at all?
That's not contemplated in this budget. I think we need another year of seeing our revenues holding steady, and then I think we can take a look at that. We know that's the ultimate goal, and we're working towards that, and it's not forgotten. But I didn't feel comfortable jumping up to that at this point during this budget. But it's the 1.5% is certainly a start in moving employees that direction.
Moves everybody, of course. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I really appreciate the work you've done on this, and I really like what I see. The only question I have is that I see the 1.5% being added to the positions, but the clarification is, for example, myself and the
I can stop you right there. And eligible elected officials. And eligible elected officials, the 1.5% was included in those that are eligible for an increase.
well, that's what I'm saying. It's included in our budget, on this final budget, so we wouldn't be eligible, would we, for that 1.5%? Myself and my chief deputy.
Those that are allowed by statute who are
Nobody's eligible that's in the middle of a term.
not
Exactly, but I'm saying it's included in here. It is included in here. If you look at my line item for my budget, it shows my increase to 63,000, whatever it is, at 1.5%. But, so the only thing that I'm saying, since you have it in the line item,
So if you recall during whenever this happened, this last legislative session, there's been some discussion who was eligible or who was not eligible. And it's my understanding that if you were newly elected, which then you would be eligible for that. You didn't have to.
I understand that.
But,
Fully
so we can take
understand.
it out of there. It was just
No, I
another
fully understand.
little cushion to have in your budget.
I fully understand what you're saying, and I appreciate, but it is included, but I just go back to not included in the budget was the position, the seasonal employee position that I requested, for approximately $14,480.
So you've been a little unclear on the seasonal position. You told me when you weren't going to fill your chief deputy position that you wanted the seasonal position, and then once you filled your seasonal, or you filled your chief deputy, then it wasn't really necessary to have your chief deputy. So
At the last budget hearing that we had, I presented that I do want the position, and I mean, I've continually said, I dropped it down from a full-time position to a seasonal position.
So we can always make budget adjustments. So if we, look at your 1.5% that we're not going to use for your salary, we can look at budget adjustments in the future if you want to consider that seasonal employee. But right now,
Yeah, I just wanted to just bring that up, that's still something that we'd like to see. I mean, it doesn't have to be today. I mean, I'm not saying change everything, just, but as we go further down the road, November, December, is approximately when our next need would be.
and yes, there is 1.5% in every elected official's budget, whether eligible or not. But then that 1.5% is there in the event that you need it for something else. So it was a little bit of time to include.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions on the motion? Sorry. So we'll
on the,
go ahead.
sure, on the replanting project, I mean, it's hard, we have to discuss these in several different contexts, I guess, but now we're in the budget context. This proposal would include a contractor for that work. Is that right? Does it include additional personnel dedicated to that?
No, it doesn't, because that would have been an increase in 2 positions for his department. So what we propose to you is increasing the other position. He has a vacancy now, plus the one that's frozen, so he has 2 positions that he can fill after this budget is approved. But it did not include another position just solely for the parcel mapping correction. So it includes a contractor to do a bulk of the work. He's getting his frozen position back, and then the other thing that we have offered is partial time from the GIS mapper in the planning department and the title examiner in the planning department to assist with this project until it's completed.
Okay. Are the rest of my fellow commissioners happy with this contractor approach?
Yeah, because it's a project that when it goes away, I don't want an extra employee in that department. I want that to go away once the project's done.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Okay. Then I don't need to argue more about it. All right. Thank you for the explanation.
Okay, further discussion, questions? Call it for a vote, then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Is there anything further to come before the...
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So, I would just like to say that I really, really, really appreciate the conversation that we had today about the budget, about the bond hearing. I think the conversation was very productive. It was very helpful to me. I really appreciate everyone's participation.
Thanks. Any further comments from commissioners? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.